Reverend Bruce.
Hi. It's amazing how every time I talk here on a Wednesday, I'll come prepared to give one talk, and then Judy will get up and talk about something in the day, or she'll show a movie, and then I'll find myself rewriting my talk or incorporating things that I should have thought of, but finally did. When we were watching the movie and the guy was talking about doubts and, people who try to stop you. And last year for Lent, you give up something for Lent. I gave up listening to people who disagree with me or criticize me. And it worked out so well, I figured I'd just keep it going for the whole year. And I'm thinking of doing it again this year, And I was also thinking when you were talking about gratitude, and you too, Pam and Judy, and it's part of what I'm going to talk about, and realizing how much of our experience of life is really just what we focus on, and all of and how much we're able to shift our inner emotional state. Samuel Johnson, who was a writer, I love his quote. It's, "Every day when I get up, I don't know whether to save the world or savor the world." And naturally, that makes it very hard to plan my day. And so much of a life is, our primary emotion. It's now been determined scientifically that compassion is our primary emotion. And, being at ease and expecting everything to be good and grateful and just happy with your life is really our natural state. But the brain hasn't changed a lot in the last 50,000 years, and the brain is our operating system for mind. And 50,000 years ago, our ancestors had to watch out for lions and tigers and things that wanted to eat us or kill them. And so the brain got really good at remembering bad things and looking for bad things that weren't really happening and not paying attention to good things that were happening, because if you ever got so focused on looking at the good things and forgot to look at the lion, well, that could be really a bad thing. And so our brains have this negative focus. And I was at a conference, it's hard to believe it was only a couple, 3 months ago, and Fred Luskin was there. He's the head of the Forgiveness Project at Stanford University, and I've heard him speak before a couple of times. And he was just talking about some new things I hadn't heard before, and I found this really interesting, and it's probably going to be useful for you to know. The purpose of adrenaline is to force us to focus on a specific problem. And when we're in these hyperadrenalized state, and our culture really encourages hyperadrenalized states where we're right in that fight or flight response. And, a lot of times I'll be minding my own business. I turn on the radio and somebody's telling me something that disturbs me on the radio. And I'll go to Facebook looking to keep up on a friend, and somebody's polluting my space with something else I should be getting upset and irritated at. Anybody have that experience besides me? And then there's my own mind. So when we're in these hyper-adrenalized states, our brain really locks us into the back of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain, and we really don't have neurological access to the cerebrum and the frontal part of the brain that can think creatively, because adrenaline forces us to focus on a specific problem. And so when we're in that state, it's almost impossible to feel things like compassion or generosity or connection or love. And so you can see how being in that state really gets in the way of our primary emotion, which is compassion. And I suppose for our ancestors, if you were, trying to get away from the lion, you weren't supposed to pull out your decision maker and put a line down the middle and, or if you're stuck in the railroad tracks and your car breaks down, you don't say, what are my options here? Because so the brain didn't want you to be thinking. It wanted you to be running or fighting or doing something. You can think about it later. So today, as Ernest Holmes pointed out, we don't run into that many physical dangers. What we run into are ideas. And I've heard it said, and I never tried to count them, but I've heard people say that we have 30 to 60,000 thoughts a day. I think most people have heard that. And I suppose 24 hours a day, we have 1,400 and something minutes, and we're awake for a lot of them. Well, what we call awake. Anyways, we're consciously present to some degree, right? And so, if you had just 10 thoughts a minute, and like right now, just notice the thoughts you're having. You're agreeing with me, you're disagreeing with me, you're wishing I'd gone away, you're thinking about the laundry that you forgot to, whatever you're doing. A lot more than 10 thoughts a minute. But if you only had 10, that would be over 14,000, right? And interestingly enough, almost all the thoughts we have, these 30 or 60,000 thoughts, almost every one of them are thoughts we had yesterday and the day before and the day before. And maybe some of them are repeats of the thoughts we had at 10 o'clock this morning when we were, anybody do that? So that leads me to brand new, once again, yay. And I brought one of my favorite books. It's The Collected Wisdom of Dr. Raymond Charles Barker. Has anybody here read that? It's a really good book. It's got forwards by two really interesting people, one by Louise Hay, who published the book, and one by Dr. Tom Costa, who spent a lot of time with Dr. Barker when he was living out in the desert, his last several years. And I think I remember one time Dr. Tom referring to this particular sermon, but there's a great chapter. It's a sermon, and it's called Yesterday Ended Last Night. For those of us who repeat those 30 or 60,000 thoughts. Anybody blame yourself for something that happened yesterday? Anybody even blame somebody else, but now you're mad at them and you're all in that agitated hyper? I guess I'm the only one. But anyways, I'll tell you, it happens to me every now and again. Like what time is it now? Okay, so he starts off, we believe in God and we believe in man. We believe in the power of mind and the power of love. Beyond those, I don't think we have any stated opinion. We are probably the most liberal of the liberals. We are the least opinionated group of people around because we only believe in God and in you. We believe in ourselves. We believe in the mind and the love of God in action in the universe. There is a dual law of possibility and probability. Religious science deals with possibility and seeks to disregard probability. Possibility is of the spirit, and probability is of the human mind. Most people are limited by their belief in probability and their failure to hold fast to possibility. That's just what he was talking about in the video. So he says, keep with possibility, not probability. Possibility negates everything from illness and age to the whole kit and caboodle of limitations. So if you can stay in possibility, something Wallace Wattles called the creative plane instead of the competitive plane. Divine wisdom doesn't know what can't be done. The divine wisdom doesn't know you are a limited factor. It only knows you as a possibility. And so everything is possible, and it's limited only by our willingness to believe. There's the catch, right? We call things beliefs because we believe them to be true. And the things that aren't happening that we really want, we see them as things that aren't true because they're not really happening. Anybody have that thing, Even when the pattern still repeats and, I really want that and I believe it, but then I got my butts, right? And everybody suffers from the twos, right? Too tall, too short, too fat, too skinny, too old, too young, too qualified, too unqualified, whatever, the twos, right? You are your own everything because you are the only deciding factor in your own mind. How many times do we really stop and think what that means? We are the only decider in our own mind. That means everything that bothers us and everything that delights us only matters because we decide that it matters. And if we can learn to start paying attention to what is it that we really want to matter to us, as opposed to other things. I have a really close friend, Carol Hughes. Some of you know her. She's my best friend I'm not married to. We went to graduate school together and we had an office suite since 1990 in Laguna Hills because we were both moving our offices at the same time and thought, well, we've always wanted to do this. And I was talking to her about something I'd heard and maybe it's listening to KPFK, and it's a really interesting thing, but it was kind of a disturbing thing. And she says, how do you know that? And why do you know that? Because what does it do for you to know that? And she was just reminding me of the things she knows I know. She says, it's your science mind. You're a religious scientist. You're a science mind. Why do you want to know that? And I said, well, I want to know what's out there in the zeitgeist, and I like to be able to discern. But she's right. I don't want to. Barker used to read the New York Times every day. But he said, I read it for entertainment. I know there's not a single word of truth in there. And, what he meant by truth is everything's what we decide we want it to be. And of course, there's a physical gestation period for some things, but once it exists and it's locked into our belief system, it's like a plant. Now it's just a matter of the plant growing. And of course, what some of us do is, anybody here plant fruits or vegetables or have a garden? Well, imagine somebody planting a tomato plant. The religious science farmer that they always bring out to give an example. So you put your tomato seed in there and you water it and you fertilize it and you keep looking and there's nothing there and you're thinking, oh boy, I sure hope it's happening. And then what starts to come up? Finally, a little piece of green starts to come up and you look at it and say, that's not a tomato. That's not working. The heck with it. Nothing. This doesn't work. That's not what a tomato is. Because if you don't know the process you're involved in, you're not going to know that you're doing it right. So Barker, as he points out, you are the only deciding factor in your mind. You are the only thinker in your thought experience. You are the only emotion in your emotions. So when you deal with how to change, you are in the possibility of consciousness if that's what you decide you want to do. And so if I work at the level of possibility to hold it, then I can and I will, because the world around me has to change the world as the world within me changes. I think Dr. Ernest Holmes said, it's Florence Scovel Shinn, I am not moved by appearances, therefore appearances move. It's a nice thing to remember. So he talks about mind. Let's see, this is the great law of mind, that the external is the internal objectified. When I'm at a point of divine possibility within myself, I see a world of change. Yesterday ended last night. The heartaches of the past are the devils of the present and the creators of evil in the future. It is well established psychologically that the only thing that really affects us is emotion, right? I mean, life is primarily an emotional experience. You've heard me say this before. If I play a song on the radio that reminds you of being 15 years old, your first thought is probably not going to be conjugating Spanish verbs and quadratic equations. And I know some of you spent hours and hours learning how to deal with quadratic equations so you could pass exams. And anybody here, the only reason I even know about those is I've helped younger people with their homework. And I saw this thing that looked like a giant square root sign. And I think it's a squared minus b squared equals x minus y squared. And I'm supposed to know what that means. And I'm supposed to plot parabolic curves with it. But I've gone actually weeks and months without using algebra ever since I left. I don't know about the rest of you. They said I'd need it sometime. Chemistry is good because when you're making coffee and you're putting cream in it, you're looking for a color change. It's basically a chemistry experiment. So that was useful. But algebra, I go years without it sometimes. But the feelings, if you're around my age and you heard a Beatles song on the radio, you'd be remembering how you were trained to think about yourself. You'd be remembering people that you liked and you wanted them to like you. And if they didn't, you'd be feeling bad if you remember that. But all the things you spent hours studying, you'd have to work for, but the emotion would come right back. So that's a real key. Life is primarily an emotional experience. So we need to learn how to overcome our brain's negative bias. And we do that by shifting our internal emotional state. And when we do that, and we shift, that negative bias just goes away and we slip into our normal born state of being compassionate and calm and caring and content. That's really nice, isn't it? Calm, caring, and content is our natural physiological state of being. Who knew? Anybody ever not feel that way? So he points out that emotion being the cornerstone of life, then yesterday carries into today only through our emotions, because the memory field is a field of emotional memory. Because the remembrance of the evils past is a part of the nature of the mind until the mind is cleared through spiritual treatment. So you stand like an island. You are you. You are not the savior, the prophet, or the saint. You are you. I am that I am. I can never be less. Therefore, if I am that which I am, there is no one can clear my thought but myself. There's another key. It's an emotional experience. We get cluttered by thoughts that remind us of the past, and we make that important, and we act right now, today, in this moment, as if that was actually happening. Anybody can remember doing that? Anybody ever been agitated for no apparent reason? I mean, it's really bizarre when that happens, you know. It's something I might even be really good. Maybe I even got some checks. I like checks. By case, I don't know if you guys like checks, but I like checks. And I'll still find myself in a really kind of a funky mood, and I'll say, this is really interesting. Why am I in a bad mood? Everything has gone well today that I was consciously paying attention to. But in the back of my subconscious, something triggered an unconscious memory of something that bothered me and threatened my sense of well-being back in the past and isn't necessarily relevant to anything, yet there I am stuck in it. You with me so far? Okay, so Dr. Barker says you shouldn't do that. He says the past holds power as long as you feel that the past is greater than the present. And so, you know, much of the science of mind is about learning different ways to change what I call the trance. We have, you know, this trance of self-imposed limitations that are based on beliefs about life, about ourselves, about everything, that for most of us are either poorly examined or barely even or not even conscious of them at all, because a lot of them happen the first 5 or 6 years of life. And people say, oh, I don't remember that. I can't see how that could be true. And so let's try an experiment. Raise your hand if you remember learning to stand up and walk, would you please? Okay, is there anybody here that English is not your first language? Okay, well, whatever your first language is, and in my case it's English, raise your hand if you remember learning to speak English. Now I see somebody in the audience that I think has a young child. So do you remember a time when she didn't speak very well? I mean, it's amazing. They're not born. I don't remember not speaking. It seems like I've always spoken, but it's amazing to watch kids and, you know, how we learn to speak. Or when we learn to stand up and walk. I estimated one time, probably from first time to getting up and everything's exciting, and then it's less exciting because I fell. A lot of negative drama there. Probably 5 to 10 times a day during that first several months, and maybe down to 5 times a day by the time I got to the toddler stage. So, you know, at least 1,700, maybe as many as 3,500 distinct events filled with drama to acquire the 3 most important skills I have: stand up, walking, and talking. And so, and maybe another 3,000 of that struggle to be understood and trying to understand what the giants were saying and why won't they give me a cookie? I'm trying to tell them I want a cookie, right? It must be frustrating. And I have no memory of any of those thousands of events. You with me? So it's at least plausible that there's a lot of other things that happened and other decisions I made about life at that time. But the truth is that if we are, and we are, these divine beings that are an extension, a direct extension of infinite power, of infinite love, infinite capacity for love and appreciation, gratitude and delight and joy. And if you combine that with something I remember observing when I was studying philosophy as an undergraduate existentialist class. And it occurred to me one day, life is always one long right now. Like right now, I'd like you to think what you're doing yesterday. And whatever you're thinking about it right now. And if you're thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, you're thinking about it right now. We could save a lot of time if we, on our downtime, if we could get some of tomorrow's breathing in today. Wouldn't we? Wouldn't it be? I mean, we're always trying to find shortcuts, There's no way that you can possibly have a good breakfast yesterday now. You can do things to increase the likelihood that you'll have a good breakfast tomorrow now. You can increase that, and whatever you do today will affect that, but there's no way you can do it until right now. So I extrapolate that out to this belief of an infinite being expressing me, and that means that right now, each one of us is not only created by the one, but right this moment we're maintained and sustained every second. Can't stop breathing for even 2 or 3 minutes, or everybody gets concerned and they start using ugly words like pull the plug. So I don't recommend you do it. But in any event, that also means that we're being created brand new in this brand new moment. And in this brand new moment, we get to choose how we want to feel, what we want to do, what we want to believe, what input do we want to accept from these 30,000 thoughts that are running around, and which ones are promoting what I want to believe versus what's this all about? This isn't what I want to believe. So if you're willing, I'd like to do a little experiment. It'll just take a few minutes. So if you're comfortable closing your eyes, and get as comfortable as you can. I always like to say that because then I watch people move in their chair and they start to discover how much discomfort they've been putting up with for the last 5 minutes that they weren't paying attention to. So get comfortable. And imagine for a few moments that you could go back and witness the beginning of the universe. We know that there's trillions and trillions of star systems, and in a universe that's probably trillions of miles across, trillions of light years across. Who knows? It's just unfathomable for me. And if you were to take all of that mass and compress it down to a point, maybe the size of an atom, or who knows how big it was, but really small, and then at just the right moment, it bursts into an explosion that sends all of that mass out across an enormity of space at just the right speed in which it can keep going, but not so fast that it never coagulates into anything, but not so slow that it doesn't escape and doesn't collapse back into itself. So imagine a being so powerful that it could create that just out of the thought of an idea of a revolving, evolving universe. And so over billions of years, these gases smashing into each other with enormous heat. I think the first element was helium, but there was more smashing and more heat, and other elements were created. And eventually, over millions of years, billions of years, some of it coagulated into stars, and some of it into star systems, and stars that burned for billions of years and went out. New stars came out, new elements. And on a planet, in one of those galaxies, not so far, far away, this very same being having an idea, a divine idea, of what it would be like to be someone exactly like you, with all of your traits, all of your physical abilities and blessings, all of your mental capabilities, all of your powers, known and unknown. Just because, for whatever reason, it's just found it to be very stimulating, I suppose, to project itself into a multiplicity of consciousness for the incredible richness of learning that can only occur in physical form. And so this being, living life through and as each of us, is a being of infinite power. Power able to build and maintain and manage unknown numbers of star systems and life forms. And all of that power radiating out, creating you, creating me, with infinite possibility. A direct expression of infinite love is an inlet and an outlet. And an ability to choose however you want to direct that incredible power of amazing creativity at your disposal. And so as you allow yourself to contemplate what to do if you decide to live the life of your dreams, what to do with that opportunity. It's something you're using all the time, but now that it's brought to your attention, you can actually choose what to do with it. And you can appreciate yourself for having that ability and having that awareness right now. And while you're thinking of all of the possibilities, regardless of probability, because there are nothing but probable possibilities to an infinite being with infinite power of which you control and direct. So as you think about that, notice your mood right now. Perhaps there's a sense of anticipation. Perhaps there's a sense of so many things, what to do, a cornucopia of opportunity. Perhaps there's some discomfort, and you can just let that go too by just imagining someone that you love unconditionally. See their face. You can see so many things we can do just shifting our mind. And that's the trick of life, is to recognize that the levers of control, the levers of power, are the things we want to think about to create the emotions that generate the likelihood and the ability to attract more love and joy in the life of our dreams. So here we are right this moment, brand new. Yay!
That was quite a way to get out of a meditation there. Yay!